The Sphinx and the Prince. There was once a prince in Egypt called Thutmose, who was a son of Pharaoh Amenhotep and the grandson of Thutmose III, who succeeded the great Queen Hatshepsut. He had many brothers and half-brothers, and because he was Pharaoh's favorite son, so they were plotting against him. Usually, these plots were to make Pharaoh think that Thutmose was unworthy or unsuitable to succeed him. Sometimes, there were attempts to make the people or the priest believe that Thutmose was cruel or extravagant or did not honor the gods, and so would make a bad ruler of Egypt. But once or twice, the plots were aimed at his very life. All this made Thutmose troubled and unhappy. He spent less and less of his time at Thebes or Memphis with Pharaoh's court, and more frequently rode on expeditions into Upper Egypt or across the desert to the 7 great oases. And even when Pharaoh commanded his presence or his position demanded that he must attend some great festival, he would slip away whenever he could with a few trusted followers, or even alone and in disguise to hunt on the edge of the desert. Thutmose was skilled on all manly exercises. He was a bowman who would plant arrow after arrow in the center of the target. He was a skilled charioteer, and his horses were faster than the wind. Sometimes he could course antelopes for miles across the sandy stretches of the desert. At others, he would seek out the savage lions in their lairs among the rock far up above the banks of the Nile. One day, when the court was in residence at Memphis of the great festival of Re at Heliopolis, a few miles farther than the Nile, Thutmose escaped from all the pomp and pageantry to hunt on the edge of the desert. He took with him the only 2 followers, and he drove his own chariot up to the steep road past Sakaria, where the great step of pyramid of Joseph stands, and away the scrub and stunted trees where the cultivated land by the Nile faded into the stony waste and the stretches of sun and rock of the great Libyan desert. They set off at the first glimmer of dawn so that they might have as much as time as possible before the great heat of midday. And they coursed the gazelle northwards over the desert for many miles parallel to the Nile but some miles away from it. By the time the sun grew too hot for hunting, Thutmose and his 2 followers had to reach a point not very far away from the Great Pyramid of Giza, which the pharaohs of the 4th dynasty had built over 1,200 years before. They stopped to rest under some palm trees. But presently Thutmose, desiring to be alone and wishing to make his prayer to the great god Harmakhis, entered his chariot and drove away over the desert, bidding his servants to wait for him. Away sped Thutmose, for the sound was firm and smooth, and at last he drew near to the pyramid of Khufu, Khafra, and Menkaura, towering up towards the sky, the burning sun of midday flashing on their golden peaks and glittering down their polished heights like ladders of light leading up to the boat of Re as it sailed across the sky. Thutmose gazed in awe at these man-made mountains of stone, but most of all, his attention was caught by a gigantic head and neck of stones, and it rose out of the sun between the greatest pyramids and a nearly buried mortuary temple of a huge spread stone blocks that stood on either side of the stone causeway leading from the distant Nile behind him right to the foot of the second pyramid, that of the Pharaoh Khafra. This was a colossal carving of Harmakis, the god of the rising sun, in the form of a lion with the head of a pharaoh of Egypt. Khafra has caused this Sphinx to be carved out of an outcrop of solid rock that happened to rise above the sun near the processional causeway leading from the Nile to his great pyramid. Thutmose could see no more than its head and shoulders and a little ridge in the desert to mark the line of its back. For a long while, he stood looking up to the majestic face of the Sphinx, crowned with the royal crown of Egypt that had the cobra's head on its brow and which held in place the folds of embroidered linen which kept the sun from head and neck. Only here the folds were of stone, and only the head of the serpent fitted into the carved rock was of gold. Then the Sphinx spoke to him in a great voice, and yet kindly as a father speaks to his son. "Look upon me, Thutmose, Prince of Egypt, and know that I am Harmakis your father, the father of all pharaohs of the upper and lower lands. It rests with you to become pharaoh indeed, and wear upon your head the double crown of south and north. It rests with you whether or not you sit upon the throne of Egypt, and whether the people of the world come and kneel before you in homage. If you indeed become pharaoh, whatever is produced by the two lands shall be yours, together with the tribute from all the countries of the world. Besides all this, long years of life, health, strength shall be yours. Thutmose, my face is turned towards you. My heart inclines to you to bring you good things. Your spirit shall be wrapped in mine, but see how the sun has closed in around me on every side. It smothers me, it holds me down, it hides me from your eyes. Promise me that you will do all the good things that a good son should do to his father. Prove to me that you are indeed my son and will help me. Draw near to me, and I will be with you always, and I will guide you and make you great." Then, as Thutmose stepped forward, the sun seemed to shine from his eyes of Harmakis of Sphinx, so brightly that they dazzled him, and the world went black and spun around him, so that he felt insensible on the sun. When he recovered, the sun was sinking toward the summit of Khafra's pyramid, and the shadow of Sphinx laid over him. Slowly he rose to his feet, and the vision had seen came rushing back to his mind as he gazed at the great shape half hidden in the sun, which was already turning pink and purple in the evening light. "Harmakis, my father!" he cried. "I call upon you and all the gods of Egypt to bear witness to my oath. If I become pharaoh, the first act of my reign shall be to free this your image from the sun and build a shrine to you and set it in stone, telling in the sacred writing of Gem of your commanded out and how I fulfilled it." Then Thutmose turned to seek his chariot, and a moment later his servants, who had been anxiously searching for him, came riding up. Thutmose rode toward Memphis, and from that day all went well with him. Very soon Amenhotep the pharaoh proclaimed him publicly as heir of the throne, and not very long afterwards Thutmose did indeed become a king of Egypt, one of her greatest kings.